Eating meat is a problem, but factory farms are a huge problem. And, this goes back to Reagan suspending the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1983. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. On the line with us is Leah Garces, the president of Mercy for Animals. Mercyforanimals.org is the website. The Twitter handle is Mercy for Animals, or Leah, Leah_Garces, Garces. Leah, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's my pleasure. I see this article, millions of U.S. farm animals to be culled by suffocation, drowning, and shooting. And I think most people think that this is really a story about how the coronavirus is disrupting our supply chains, and people getting it in meatpacking plants are slowing down the rate at which they can move animals through this factory farm system. But I see this, and I'm guessing you do, as more of an indictment of the way that we are producing our food supply than it is anything else. Your thoughts on this, Leah?
Yeah, I think that what's happening here is factory farming and these industrial slaughterhouses are being exposed. It's like the emperor has no clothes, and they're being exposed as a vulnerable system that treats both workers as expendable and farmed animals as something to be thrown away. So what's happening across the country right now is workers are standing shoulder to shoulder while the rest of us are 6 feet apart. So it's no surprise these are becoming hotspots for COVID-19. And the pandemic is also severely affecting animals. So as the slaughter plants shut down due to worker shortages, there's this backlog of millions of animals who are supposed to be slaughtered. The result is millions of them instead are being slaughtered in-farm in these horrific ways and then thrown away like they're trash.
Wow. So what's the solution to this? I mean, this is front and center right now. But if you talk to people who live in the communities where these giant factory farms are located, you find that pigs are no longer pooping like normal. Instead, it's just continuous diarrhea, and you get these giant pools, these lagoons of waste. The same thing with cows, that is actually toxic and is contaminating groundwater and is making the air stink miles away, destroying property values. Communities trying to push back against it. I mean, is this? We're not going to flush eating meat out of our culture any day soon. Although we can all work to minimize it as much as possible. But is a return to small farms? I mean, basically banning factory farms, is that one solution? How do we deal with this?
Yeah, it's a hard problem to solve, but a lot of people are trying to solve it now, and there's a lot of motivation to solve it now that it is exposed as this really horrific system. And as you said, as you're pointing out, it's highlighted right now, but the problems of pollution, worker abuse, animal abuse, it's really benefiting so few people. And that has been going on for decades. So it feels like the whole issue has really come to a head right now. And we actually have some opportunities for the first time in my career, to really reform this system. And there's a couple ways to do that. One is through some of these COVID-19 relief packages that are coming out. And what we're really advocating for is money shouldn't go into just propping up a bad system, propping up a system that's, as you said, polluting communities, that's hurting workers, that's hurting animals. Instead, those relief packages that are coming out really need to think about reforming a broken food system. Yeah,
my wife, we grew up in the 1950s as children, and her grandmother, her mother grew up on a farm in central Michigan, and it was her grandmother's farm, and she used to go to the farm as a little kid, and it was a 100-acre farm, and they were pretty much self-sufficient. They had a couple of cows, and they had chickens and stuff like that, but they literally ate what they grew, and they treated their animals well, and as well as a food animal can be treated, I suppose, and slaughtered them in ways that they could live with, that were as painless as possible for the animals. And nonetheless, my wife and her brother used to name the animals, which made her grandmother crazy. But back then, I don't believe there were factory farms. I mean, you said this is, just a moment ago, you said this has been going on for decades. Isn't this whole factory farm thing, industrial agriculture, using massive amounts of antibiotics and injecting them with hormones and stuff, isn't this all really recent? This really has come about in the last 40 years, or did I just not notice them back in the 1950s and 60s?
No, you're right. I mean, this was factory farming as a methodology of creating protein was really created after World War II, and there were food shortages. So there was a bunch of subsidies created and incentives for consolidating in this way. But it sort of blew up, and particularly the pig industry and the chicken industry consolidated into this monopoly in our food system. And so you have a lot of the farmers, for example, in the chicken industry are living in complete debt. They're basically indentured servants, and they can't get out from under the thumb of big meat. And you can't have those small farms as easily. You can't just walk up to a slaughterhouse and bring your chickens. You can't. To be contracted.
Right. Would that have been back in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan suspended in '83? He suspended enforcement of the Sherman Antitrust Act. The result of that was these big ag companies were manipulating prices and running small farmers out of business. That was the decade when my wife's grandmother sold her farm, in fact. And you had Willie Nelson doing his Farm Aid concerts and things. And this was the birth of the major industrialization of animal food, food from animals, right?
Yeah, it certainly accelerated then, and yeah, you're remembering correctly, and it was accelerated at that point, but it still goes on. In fact, some of the big chicken companies right now are being investigated for price fixing, where they're keeping the price of chicken at a high rate just so they can pocket more money. And there's a whole federal investigation going on into that right now. I mean, it continues. And this past month, we saw Trump issue an executive order just to force slaughterhouses to stay open. And what that executive order actually did is it shields meat companies from liability, where all these workers are getting sick and dying. They're now going to be protected. And that actually functioned right away. Smithfield had a lawsuit. It's a very serious thing where our protein production system, first of all, is so inefficient and puts so many people, so many animals in our environment at risk, and yet is propped up and supported and subsidized by our taxpayer dollar. And so we're fighting really, really hard at this moment because we feel like there's just this rare glimpse of hope where funds could instead go to reforming this broken food system. And we're particularly the HEROES Act, which is out for consideration right now. It's just it passed the House. It passed the House. It's going to the Senate now. And right now, the language includes repaying the industry for all of that horrible on-farm mass slaughter that we talked about at the beginning of this. And we think citizens around the country should be writing to their senators and say, that's outrageous. Taxpayers should not be paying for the industry to keep doing what it's doing in the way it's doing it in such a harmful way. Instead, they need to really hit reset on this system. It's time. It's time.
Yeah. Leah, we just have a few seconds left, but you mentioned a lot of this is happening out of view. It's happening out of view because it's illegal to take pictures of a lot of these places. Are those laws changing?
Some of them are getting worse. They're called ag-gag laws. It makes it illegal for us. It makes it a jailable offense to take photos of abuse inside a factory farm.
Amazing. I mean, this is such a corrupt industry. It's just mind-boggling.